How are you?
I ache from every fibre of my body. I did a big install yesterday. Did 2 alcove units in one day.
2 in one day?
2 in one day. Yeah, two. You know, I'm calling them alcove units. They're not actually no alcoves. We're actually bothered by this installation, but it was small cabinet below and bookcase above. So classic alcove type unit. And I did 2 in one day, which is hard at the best of times, but these were all up many flights of stairs, and one of them was big. One of them was almost 400 deep for the bookcase as well. So that was a big old lump to lift up on top of the cabinet, right up tight against the ceiling as well. So yeah, I'd say that I feel like somebody in their 90s at the moment, except my dad's in his 90s, and he probably feels a lot better than I do at the minute. I just like I've been shredded. I'm really, really aching everywhere. I may have to get up and walk around a bit. Otherwise, if I sit in this chair for another hour or two, I may never get out again, you know.
Yeah, you feel like you're going to seize up, don't you? It's a funny feeling when you've been on jobs like that. But that sounds brutal, doing all that. It
was tough, but we got it done. It was one of those things that was the only day they had available. In fact, it turned out that they couldn't be there. They had to be in at work anyway. So, it was a bit... it wasn't too bad, actually. It was hard, but I had help to get all the stuff in. My delivery guy gives me a hand in with all the stuff, so we got it all upstairs without too many problems. And then I got my gear in. So I had all the tools and stuff in we couldn't get there before 9. So I had everything in and ready to go by about 9:30, 9:40, around there. And I got the first one in, not the twiddly bit around the edges, but the base in and the bookcase on, and everything sort of nailed down tightly by about 11:30. So it wasn't too bad, and that was with some fiddly cutouts around sockets and things, which I hadn't realised were there, because, of course, the space wasn't completely clear when I went to do the measure up.
I've been there before where it's like,
yeah,
you've got a socket there. Sure, that wasn't there.
Yeah, that's right. I should be grateful that they had actually moved some things out of the way, although there was this a mobile with butterflies, might have been elephants, I don't know, I wasn't really paying much attention. One of those, kids' bedrooms, so, 2 little girls, 2 twins, stuff everywhere, and they'd cleared the space pretty well, but there was obviously a mobile hanging from the ceiling that they couldn't reach. So if you've ever tried to stand on top of a platform whilst manhandling what felt like 4-foot square mobile full of delicate little things on strings, and then you get it off the ceiling, and what the heck do you do with it?
Yes.
Where do you put it? The sticky pad's gone. You can't put it on the ceiling somewhere else. In the end, I had to sort of drape it off the end of one of the bunk beds in order to get it out of the way. But yeah, I managed to do that without getting too many of the strings crossed, which is a bonus in my view.
So were these units completely built in the workshop before going, and then fitted as pre-assembled units? Then
pre-assembled, yeah. I've started doing that. If I can get them in, if I know I can get them in, then I'll pre-build in the workshop. So I leave the backs off, because then it's easier to get them. It's easier to manhandle them in when you haven't got a back on it. But I fix the back to the bookcase section. And it seems to have worked pretty well, yeah. So the cabinets were built, all the shelves, there's an adjustable shelf in the cabinet, and a single fixed centre shelf in the bookcase, and then adjustables above and below. So it's not too heavy a lump. But one of them was, a metre wide, 400 deep, and metre 90 high, the bookcase section. So it's a big lump to lift in place, and of course that centre shelf it's in the wrong place to be able to lift it in comfortably. So you're up a platform or a ladder trying to sort of lift this in, and there wasn't much clearance between that and the ceiling.
Lordy, and are these all scribed face frames and everything, or
these were just I templated the spaces first, so I had a reasonable idea of how the walls were going. And with just scribed infills. In fact, the back wall, they're both on sort of 2 corners of a house, so that all 4 walls they were going against were external. So I wasn't going to chop them around too much. They were just scribed infills. The back walls weren't too bad, but the side walls were a bit wackadoodle. So yeah, scribed infill to those.
And what about on the floor? Just a skirting along the front or something? Or
skirting along the floor, the usual story. I fit them on a plinth, which is lower than the skirting because you want to make as much use of the height as possible. And you chop the skirting out to get the plinth in, and then you nibble it back where the bookcase goes, because obviously the plinth's a little bit smaller. And then I just fit a plain white 6mm MDF, skirting, inverted commas, fascia around the plinth, just so that it looks tidy. And, top tip, what I've only just started doing, and I should have been doing this years before, is actually before you put I always used to get the plinth in and then get the cabinet in. Of course, it's way, way easier to fit that little fascia strip around the plinth before you put the cabinet on it, because you can just sort of offer it up and draw around it, cut it to size, and boom, it's done.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Life is a constant learning lesson, isn't it?
We live and learn. We live and learn. Welcome back to the Measuring Up podcast, the UK's first, and as far as we're concerned, favourite commercial joinery podcast. I'm Peter Millard, and as well as running a virtual 10-minute workshop for YouTube, I run a small but far from perfectly formed carpentry and cabinet making business in the no man's land of West London.
And I'm Andy MacLellan, and I run a joinery business up in Newcastle upon Tyne, where I make bespoke stuff out of wood for clients and cabinets and alcove units and all that sort of thing. And when I'm not doing that, I've got the Gosforth Handyman YouTube channel as well. And every couple of weeks we get together in our internet cafe and we have a chat about all sorts of things joinery related, don't we, Peter?
We do indeed. That was me anyway for the last week or so. We're recording this on Friday, the 26th of April. We just had Easter weekend. I was in the workshop working all Easter weekend because life's like that sometimes. How about you? Did you have a good break?
Yeah, it was. I was working for the first half of the Easter holidays on that alcove job.
Yeah.
And then the second half ended up really turning into this whole bed repair. I was supposed to be having a week off to help decorate my daughter's bedroom with my wife, but as per usual, kind of life got in the road.
Yeah.
And halfway through the decorating, I think it was halfway through when I was on that alcove unit job, my wife kind of said, you know how you're quite busy on this job at the minute, and well, the whole bed's just snapped in half. And it's like, okay, and
that's just not what you need, is it?
Yeah, and we need the bed to kind of finish our room once it's all decorated and stuff. Otherwise, we've got literally a completely finished room with a broken bed in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll get a chance to fix it? And hence, it then the more I started looking into it, because if you've not already seen the video, one of these beds, it's a set of bunk beds, just cheap stuff that we got from I think it was Tesco Direct at the time, but I think Wayfair fulfilled them or whatever. Right. But it's one of these beds that comes up like everywhere. You do a search on the internet and like every big retailer sells beds that look like this.
Surprised you didn't make one, Andy, to be honest. You're a joiner, you've got time,
A lot of people said that, yeah, because I've got nothing better to do at the weekends than do more joinery.
Exactly.
So, but that is the plan now. I'm so dismayed with what I've bought from the shop that I am just going to make her a set of bunk beds. Because she doesn't even need bunk beds. When we got them for her, she was very much into, I want bunk beds, and now she's getting older, she just wants 2 separate single beds so that she can have friends sleep over and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And but they're designed so you can separate them out into 2 separate beds.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started taking them to bits to do the repair that it became really obvious how bad these beds were. And, to the point that these are apparently manufactured to British standards and kite marked and approved and meet all the BS, whatever it is, BS being the appropriate term, I think. And, we didn't expect them to last forever, but I expected them to last a bit longer than they lasted. And I certainly didn't expect a 9-year-old sitting on the edge of the bed to cause the whole bed frame to just snap in half.
Yeah, they get quite expensive if you have to change them out every other year, don't they?
Yeah, and
speaking.
One of the rails, one of the beds broke a couple of years ago when I just sat on the edge reading a story for my daughter, and it was like, oh, well, maybe I just need to lay off the pies a bit. and what happened there was the slat supports just weren't attached properly, and the glue just gave way and the slat support came off the side of the rail, and it was kind of, maybe it was just I've been unlucky, and it's just been a rail that happened to be not attached properly. And then it's not until I've been doing this repair that it's like, nope, the whole bed's like that. It's an absolute... If she'd been on the top bunk when that broke, she would have... And if there'd been a friend in the bottom bunk, she and the contents of the bed would have fallen all the way through and crushed whoever was in the bottom bunk.
Yeah,
complete with very sharp nails.
Yeah,
and
the potential for liability is extraordinary, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrible. And I mean, Tesco Direct doesn't really exist anymore, so they don't care. And had a chat with Wayfair, and they've said that they've stopped selling the bed, but the bed's still out there. There'll be millions of people with these designs of beds, and we've been on to Trading Standards, and Trading Standards are looking into it because I don't see how these can possibly meet British standards.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if something's stamped to say meets BS, whatever it is for bunk beds, you would think that it would be able to handle a 9-year-old sitting on the side of a bed.
Yeah.
And there were some choice comments of, oh, your daughter was obviously jumping up and down on the bed, and she doesn't do that. She's not that sort of person. She goes to bed to read a book. She's not she's not a bed jumper. She outgrew that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So and then that turned into a video, and suddenly a week's disappeared.
No family crisis. Every family crisis can be turned into a video opportunity, can't it?
Yes. So it was one of those things where it's, well, let's try and get something positive out of it, and then hopefully, if anyone else has got this design of bed, that they're aware of it, because I would hate to think that I know about this problem, and then someone happens to put, have you seen this bed? It just collapsed and my daughter's been seriously injured. And it's like, oh, yeah, actually, that happened with us. And I would feel pretty bad if I hadn't put something out there, you know. So
it's really interesting, actually, because I quoted some well-fitted stuff for somebody, and I got a call from them. They're still mulling that over. Don't think it's going to happen, but I got a call from them, and it turns out they've got a little sideline business importing stuff from China. And lo and behold, they've got a dozen bunk beds made out of oak, and they don't comply with British standards because the gaps between, they've got rails around the top where the ladder goes up in a bit, and you've got an open sort of slatted, like a ladder type rail, and the holes between the rails are too big. They're supposed to be less than 70 mil, I think. And he said, "Oh, is there anything you could do with it?" I said, "Well, I'd burn it personally, but whatever. I can have a look at it." And I said, "Well, maybe if we can take it apart and move the slats along, because it's some kind of weird oak in inverted commas. I don't know, incredibly dense, very heavy hardwood." So okay, fine. I took one of these ladder sides away, and I cannot get it apart. I just can't exert enough pressure on it to break the glue joint. I don't know what they've used, but it's phenomenally strong, absolutely incredible. So I've just said, I give up. Can't help it.
Is it oak or?
It looks like it, yeah. It's quite dark.
Yeah.
But I say very, very, very dense. Yeah, it could be stained, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. But this is stuff that they've imported.
This is stuff they've imported
it as a complete unit.
Yeah, but they can't sell it because it doesn't comply with standards. Whoops.
But there you go. That'll be It's kind of crazy that the standards are taking into account a millimetre size gap between rails, which I understand why that exists, and you don't want children's heads getting stuck or whatever.
Out of interest, how many kids do you know that have 70mm heads, by the way?
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then you've got beds that are too weak to even sit on that apparently do meet British standards.
Yes, it's crazy.
And the interesting thing with these, the design of bunk beds that we've got, when you do a search around the internet, there's loads of companies advertising them as solid oak beds because they're available in either white or wood colour.
Wood colour.
And the ones that are wood colour,
yeah, real tree wood.
Well, they're advertised as solid oak.
Cheeky.
And are they hell solid oak? No way. They're some cheap. I mean, I don't know what the wood is, and a lot of people have commented on YouTube trying to take a guess at what it is. It's very, very fast-grown softwood.
Yeah.
And then you go onto some other sites, and loads of people have put in the comments, "Oh, really nice bed, but I'm sure it's not oak." And it's like, yeah, it's definitely not oak. I can tell you that much. You don't get oak with growth rings that are like an inch and a half apart between each growth ring. Coming on for like 3 inches diameter growth in a single year. It's just no.
Yeah, not going to happen, is it?
And then you've got other sites that it advertises as solid oak, and then you go into small print and it says something like oak finish or looks like oak. And it's like, yeah, you can't just...
Yeah, might be sort of a bit like...
So yeah, it's interesting to see when stuff that is solid oak, and it is so solid that you can't break it apart, and then that doesn't meet regs, but yet folk are allowed to sell this junk. It's
crazy.
Yeah.
What a world.
Yeah, I think just trying to get the message across as well of you do get what you pay for, but you do also assume that if it's got the British Standard kite mark on, that it's going to at least meet some minimal standards.
Yeah. Well, then you do wonder what the British kite mark is for, don't you? I mean, it used to stand for something.
Well, yeah, and you do hear about massive cutbacks in budgets to trading standards and all that sort of thing, which you hear quite regularly. You kind of hear about it more on the grapevine. Maybe this is a more blatant illustration of what those sort of problems the budget cuts like that can cost. But
yeah, maybe.
So next time we record this show, we will be at Maker Central.
We will, indeed. Do we feel prepared for it?
No, not in any way, shape or form.
Not at all.
Not at all. I keep panicking and thinking like, oh my, because it is literally the next show that we record. That's 2 weeks' time, isn't it?
It is 2 weeks today, yeah. We'll be there.
That we'll be there. So no, I'm not... I keep on putting it into my head that it's 4 weeks' time for some reason.
Yeah, I know. If only it was a month away, that'd be fine. I could cope with that. But in a couple of weeks' time, it's going to be... Yeah.
The thing is, 2 weeks ago, I was probably thinking, oh, well, it's about 8 weeks away before Maker Central.
Exactly. We are massively looking forward to it, but it's going to be one of the... Do you get that sort of slightly floaty feeling when you're doing something for the first time and you realise, oh my God, I'm actually here. It's actually happening to me.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those, I think, for me. It's going to be sort of,
Totally. And
it's so big and we've just got this little stand and, there's so many other proper grown-up people here.
Yes.
And us.
So if you do find us, then look after us because we will be...
we'll be sensitive little souls.
Hiding in the corner of our
crying.
Our stand.
That's right. Come and visit us. Stand G25 is where we're at. So come and visit us. Come and say hello. And because we'd love to meet as many people as we can.
Absolutely. Come and have a natter. We're there on the Saturday and the Sunday. If you want to stand a better chance of having a chat with us, the Sunday is typically a little bit quieter than the Saturday. And normally late on tends to be a bit quieter. If you arrive like 12 o'clock on the Saturday, I would pretty much guarantee it's going to be very busy and you might have a bit of a wait. But if you try and come either later on in the day or on the Sunday, sometime you probably find it's a little bit more relaxed. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I missed last year's, of course, infamously, because I was away. Got my dates wrong. So this will be my first Maker Central as well. So very much looking forward to that.
It's a great... Well, last year was a fantastic show, and as we've said, this year might be the last show. So we don't know about anything being confirmed for next year yet. So do get yourself along. We'll include a link in the show notes, but if you just Google Maker Central, and it's at Birmingham NEC in a couple of weeks' time. Well, in fact, how will that relate to when the show goes out? Are we advertising a thing that is already completed?
Possibly, yeah, that's a good point.
I hadn't thought of that. No, so this will go out on the Monday before Maker Central, won't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll be recording the one. Yeah, it's okay. We're good.
We're okay.
We're playing with the time-space continuum in podcast time at the moment. Yeah,
and we are going to try and do a bit of show recording at Maker Central, because we would normally record on the Friday, like a week before the show goes out.
We'll try and find a quiet little corner where we can huddle around our collective Zooms and chat about how the day has gone or how the weekend's gone. Yeah?
Yes, doubtless it'll go in a blur.
I'm sure it will. Yeah.
I'm immensely looking forward to it. Last year was amazing. You know, whether or not you're a hobby woodworker or in the trades and do it professionally, there's something for everyone at Maker Central. It's a very interesting show. It's not just about one particular thing. You've got people in all, in all sorts of industries.
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Makers from all around the planet. And obviously some of the biggest YouTube makers on the planet are going to be there as well. And us.
And us. Yeah, so and you. Congratulations on your 40,000 subscriber. Shot through that in the week and beyond. I had a quick look earlier on, and I do apologise as well. I hadn't realised just how well your drywall repair video had done. You said it was a mini viral. You know, over 150,000 views on that. That was amazing.
Yeah, it's
and more now. It's pushing 200, isn't it?
I haven't checked, to be honest, because I don't know about you, but I find that once it gets to a certain number of comments on a video, a lot less people comment. So I normally kind of assess the how well a video is doing by how many comments are coming through. And if I'm getting a lot of comments, it's like, oh, hello, a video is doing well. But then once the comments get past, maybe 300 or 400 comments, the comments seem to die down, probably because people realise that once there's 300 or 400 comments on a video, their comment's probably not going to get read.
Yeah.
So the comments have definitely dropped off, but I think it's still doing all right view-wise.
Yeah.
It's just, as I say, it's one of those frustrating things where it's like, why that video?
Yeah.
Why can't it be the compressor video where it took me a week to make it and I've destroyed an £800 camera lens? But such is life. That video, my compressor video, has made, I think, £15 so far.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I'm not complaining, but it's just
for a hobby, you're doing all right.
Yeah, oh God. It's so unpredictable, and the thing is, you get these little spikes from videos every now and then it will die off and it'll go back to normal. At the minute, it did have, the channel had a bit of a peak from when that video initially went semi-viral type thing, and but it's back to kind of normal.
The trouble is your analytics go crazy then, don't they? Because it looks like you're falling off a cliff because you're coming down the other side of that slope and everything is down. Your views, your watch time, everything is.
And this was one of my mistakes that I made probably at the beginning of last year. Towards the end of the year before that, so one of my videos, it was probably my first video that went semi-viral, and it was my sawdust video, which again was just a very random video about what to do with sawdust.
Yeah.
And that went like mini viral, and that must be approaching 1 million views by now. Wow. I think I haven't checked. It was very close to 1 million views last time I looked, and that had its little spike, and suddenly the thing that tells you how much you're making from YouTube just shoots up. Well, I didn't realise at the time that it was all because of that one video. I was kind of thinking, oh, here we go, the channel's finally taking off. This is it. This is the point where I can just ditch everything else and I need to just concentrate on YouTube. And for a couple of months, the channel was making decent enough money that I could, not live off it, but certainly consider winding down other work a little bit just to concentrate on the YouTube side.
Yeah.
And then after 2 months, it went the revenues just dropped off a cliff because that one video had done its viral thing and then gone back to normal again.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's how YouTube works.
That's how it is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, mine's remains to be in the doldrums. You know, I'm gaining new subscribers like pulling teeth at the minute for me, and that's partly because of the sort of videos I've been putting out. These very detailed, sort of longer series on particular builds and things are very of a greater interest to a smaller section of people. So they're not a sort of general purpose crowd pleasers. And I think I said in the last one, you know, the engagement goes up, but the views go way, way, way down. So I've got a couple of sort of what I hope are going to be crowd pleaser type videos formulated, which will start coming through fairly soon. But,
yeah, you've just got to chuck the crowd pleasers in every now and then, because otherwise your videos just seem to go out to the same people.
Yeah,
and of your core subscribers, there'll be a bunch who will watch all of your videos, and as we've said before, there'll be a bunch who just watch when they've got time or whatever, and unfortunately it is quite a niche thing at the end of the day, and proven by, you know, every time I do a detailed build video, it gets a fraction of the views of the more generic type stuff I do.
Yeah.
And I had someone ask, you know, if I haven't got time to film doing alcove installs, could I pay someone to do the filming? and it's like, you're talking about a video that would make maybe 20 quid at absolute tops.
Yeah.
So, and what part do you get them to film? You know, you're on a job that lasts a week.
A week, yeah.
Which, because you now
you can
have
guarantee if you get them in for a day, it's going to be the day when not much is happening.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know, you get them in.
You'd be better off shoving a GoPro in the corner of the room, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And then what kind of a video is that? That's just watching somebody work. You know, we've said before, what's the point of that? That's not a teaching, that's not a learning thing. That's just, you know, watching somebody nail bits of wood together.
Yeah, and to do it justice, you've got to talk about every element of it, because every bit you're making decisions on, right, okay, this needs to be aligned like this so that this bit fits. And if you don't explain that, then, you know, you just get the viewer becomes more and more confused, and then eventually loses interest. So if you don't explain all the little bits, and you get people commenting all the time on videos saying, oh, your video's too long, and it's like, specifically which bit that you already know about would you like me to miss out?
Would you like to cut? Yeah. As always, the people who don't make videos tend to have all the answers, or maybe the people who don't make anything have all the answers. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, I would love to employ someone to film us on site, but the costs would just it'd be way higher than what I'd ever make from the video, and plus it would just take so much longer. As we've said before, when you film a project, it more than doubles the amount of time it takes. It generally, if you're going into detail on how to do something, I would say minimum triples the time it takes to do an install. So, and
to do things nicely with all the cutaways, with all the B-roll and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's just time consuming, let alone the editing time and all the rest of it. And this isn't just us complaining, oh, look at us, how hard we work. This is just a statement of fact, you know.
Yeah, it's just to explain, really.
It takes a long time and effectively costs a lot of money to run a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And you've got to get something back.
If I could guarantee or even have an inkling that the video was going to get a couple of 100,000 views, then I would definitely consider it. But to this date, after making 200 plus videos, I've never had a build video. I don't think they've barely broke 10,000 views. Never mind getting up to the level where you would actually make enough money to even contemplate, you know, turning it into a regular thing on the show. It just doesn't make enough. It doesn't even make enough for Patreon. You know,
no.
I was considering, you know, could I do it as a Patreon only thing? And it's like, not really. No. It's still a crazy amount of work to try and anyway. not whinging on, just trying to explain.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully that makes sense.
So, follow-up. Will it never end?
I was debating whether or not to talk about this one. I don't know. Does it warrant chatting about?
No, not really. It's, I'd say that, it's just, yet again, somebody's popped up on the YouTube channel and made comments about how you can't claim to be what you be unless you're time served, and how it's just a statement of fact. You can be good in your own field of woodworking, but there's not being time served gives you a much greater range of skills and knowledge. Does it? I don't know.
So
I don't know.
It comes up so many times, this whole time served thing, and as I've said many times, I have utmost respect for folks who are time served and have completed their apprenticeship and they are qualified and they are now, and they've been working in the field for many years, and I have absolute respect and admiration for their work, generally speaking. But there are two problems, and the first problem is that to become time served is almost impossible unless you're 16 years old, because nobody wants to take on 40-year-old apprentices.
Yep.
And the second problem is that there is still no definition of what time served actually means, and we've had people saying it means you've completed an apprenticeship for 5 years, blah blah blah, but that might have been the case 10 or 20 years ago, but that's not the case now. It doesn't work like that. You can complete an apprenticeship in as little as 18 months on a building site, effectively as a labourer, and you will still be regarded as a time-served joiner at the end of it. So don't tell me that someone with 20 years' experience of doing a job professionally, but happens to have not worked on a building site for 18 months or whatever, don't tell me that they're inferior to the people who have done that. I don't know what the answer is. And there's certainly, and he's saying just a statement of fact, that there is no statement of fact there. Anyone can call themselves a joiner. There is no formal requirement. It's not like an electrician where you have to complete formal qualifications for Part P and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
It's not like a gas engineer who has to be gas safe registered and all that. There is no formal qualification required to be a joiner or carpenter in the UK. There is if you want to work on a building site, but not if you're just either self-employed or working for a small firm. It just simply doesn't exist. If you think that's wrong, please send us a link to something that explains it, because we have had so many people. Yeah,
absolutely. We'd love to know if what we're saying is wrong here. But as far as I'm aware, you're absolutely right. There is no formal requirement for those terms of work. You can call yourself a joiner, you can call yourself a cabinet maker, you can call yourself a carpenter. And if you are a time-served joiner, carpenter, cabinet maker, maybe it tears you up inside that this is the case. But as far as we're aware, there's no formal requirement to have gone through a formal education process to have those titles. I think we.
And the other thing to bear in mind is that we're fighting your corner here. It's only one or two people who have come back with comments like this, because I agree that the system is a shambles at the minute, and we are fighting your corner, and we are doing things behind the scenes to try and get a better understanding of what the problems are and what could be done to resolve this. But you can't possibly sit there and say everything is dandy at the minute, because you see the standards of work of people who are just coming out of college, and the problem is that there's some very, very good colleges out there putting out amazingly trained apprentices and carpenters and cabinet makers and whatnot. But there's also some very, very bad ones where they are getting taught, and we get messages about this all the time to the show, where people have just quit the course because they've not been learning anything at all.
Yeah.
Where they've literally been put in a room and they're just left to it, and then they've not even been given an apprenticeship at the end of it, so they've not been able to complete anything. And then somehow they're getting the qualification signed off, which is something that I'm trying to find out a bit more information about, where people are apparently becoming qualified without completing an apprenticeship, which I didn't know that was possible. But I'd love to hear a bit more about that if you know whether or not you can get a formal, for example, level 2 NVQ or whatever without completing an apprenticeship, because my understanding was that you had to do the apprenticeship. But we're hearing more and more reports of people where the qualification is just getting signed off and they've done nothing. So
before you know it, they're working in a factory making beds, you know.
Oh, well, yes. It is an interesting topic, so I'm sure it'll come up again and again and again.
Up, time and time again.
But please bear in mind, we are fighting your corner here.
Yeah,
and we don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. It's just, at the moment, there are problems that need to be sorted out, and they don't appear to be getting sorted out. So,
yeah. Incidentally, how did we get to be more than halfway through season 3?
Oh, I don't know.
So I've just realised, episode 26, we're beyond the halfway point, aren't we?
I don't know. Well, how did we get to being nearly 40 minutes into the show already?
Well, no. You talk too much.
I know. What else have we heard back from?
We got some great feedback from through the email address. The show email, of course, is contact@measuringuppodcast.com. From Martin. Martin says, third time lucky for this message. Browser wasn't having any of it for the first two for some reason. It says it's just catching up with episode 24, where we have a go at Patreon and its user interface. He's in total agreement. He says it's like trying to use a wheelbarrow that has a flat tyre. I know that all too well. Back in my photography assistant days, we were doing a job somewhere, and there was a load of cases and things, so I had to carry, and the method of transportation was a wheelbarrow with a flat tyre, and it was no help whatsoever. I would have been better off picking them up and walking with them. Anyway, Martin says you'll find this message on there eventually, but I thought I'd resend just to be sure. And we had wishes us well, happy Easter to both of you from Hungary. He says he's been a fan for a while. I've been watching all of the videos, and the podcast is his first one. He works virtually alone out in Hungary for 3 weeks at a time. And he says that the podcast is helping keep him sane, which is fantastic. He says the distraction of the two of us talking helps tremendously, and he's cancelled his subscription to a magazine and patronised, if that's the word, both of our YouTube channels and the Measuring Up podcast. So thank you very much to Martin for doing that. He says keep up the good work and hopes to see us at Maker Central. We hope to see you too then, Martin, as well.
Fantastic stuff, Martin. Thanks again. Yeah. And a big shout out to everyone listening in Hungary.
Everyone listening everywhere, yeah, absolutely.
What else have we got? We've got a note from Tony, and Tony has mentioned that he's really enjoying the show, and it's one of the first podcasts that he's listened to, and he listened to episode 1, but then for some reason, instead of going to episode 2, it jumped to episode 24, which is weird. Now, I've noticed...
I wonder if he's listening through the website.
I don't know. He hasn't said what he's listening to it on. If anyone else notices issues with episodes appearing in the wrong order, then please do get in touch, because I've noticed this happening on some other podcasts.
Oh, really?
Not on ours, but and using it through a proper podcast app. And I'm convinced it's something to do with this. You know how there was the whole episode numbering shake-up when Apple suddenly said you can't include the episode number in the title of the podcast, which is insane.
Yes. Ridiculous.
But I think as a result of that, a lot of shows have started taking the episode number out of the title. But I've noticed some shows where the episode number is still in the title.
Okay.
they're now showing in like a really weird order. And I haven't seen it, as I say, on our show, but I have seen it on some other podcasts. So if you do spot that problem of the episode showing in the wrong order, do let us know.
Yeah, please do, because we
literally no idea why that's happening.
And of course, we do listen to our own podcasts periodically, but we don't get to. It's much better if the hive mind of all our listeners keep an eye on this for us, because obviously, we only get to see one instance of it, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting us know about that, Tony. That's really good to hear.
A weird one. What else has been happening in the world of woodwork then?
The world of woodworking. I've been using this linseed oil paint. I've made I think I mentioned it the last time. I had it's been specified for a couple of little bedside tables that I was making. This is the one where they sent me the wrong dimensions. They sent me the wrong drawings, the wrong plans initially, and we finally got to the bottom of that. So that was all delayed start, and then they've specified this sort of wackadoodle linseed oil paint, which is beautiful, I have to say. I put a little snippet of video about it on my Instagram, saying it's might well be my new favourite paint. That was before I started using it in earnest. I'll just qualify. Because it is lovely. It goes on really well, and it has a very long drying time. This particular one has 24-hour recoat time, so a full 24 hours, not overnight. I've discovered a full 24 hours before it can be recoated. And
I bet if you've got quite a warm workshop. I bet if it's a cold workshop, it could take days.
Could take longer. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've had even Osmo oil where if my workshop's been cold. It's taken nearly a week for it.
But it was taking so long. It was backed up. I had to get these bedroom alcove units in yesterday. So I knew I had to start painting them soon, but I had to get to the bottom of these bedside tables, and I've still got them. They're still not finished. But what I ended up doing, because the paint was taking so long to dry, I was prepping them, putting another coat of paint on them, and actually putting them in the van to get them out of the way. Where it baked beautifully, actually. It worked really well. And now the whole van smells of linseed oil, so I have a head like a watermelon whenever I drive anywhere, with the windows down, whatever the weather, But it was a flash of inspiration, because I didn't know what to do with them. It was over the bank holiday weekend, so I didn't have access to the other sort of storage rooms where my workshop is. There are other rooms that I used when I had my big job on last year for storing stuff, keeping it out of the way. So I thought, well, what can I do with it? Stick it in the van.
That does the job.
And it worked really well.
It is that constant challenge of what to do with stuff so that it doesn't get covered in dust. So you can actually get on with other work in your shop.
Because there's always fine dust in the air, with the best will in the world, even with the air scrubber on. I think that stirs the air up more than it extracts the dust, to be honest, sometimes. But what was happening was these bedside tables are made out of MDF, shocker, and it's 36mm section. We talked a little bit about this last time, where I rip two 18mm pieces, glue them together, then rip them to 24 and put 6mm on either side to cover up the join. So there's still a 6mm end grain, let's call it, cut edge, against a face, which you've got to, produce a nice clean finish on. And that's usually fine. You sand it, fill it, sand it, fill it, sand it. Treat it like you would for a sprayed finish. Use the 2-pack resin, get it up nice and smooth, coat a primer on it, looks fantastic. I put a coat of this linseed oil paint on it, come back 24 hours later, and you can see a line on it.
Oh.
There's a definite, line between the face and the two ends. And I had one, of course, right on the front face, which just would not go away. And I've been very, very gently sanding it back and putting another coat on, gently sanding it back and putting another coat on all week. I did it again when I came back from this this install yesterday. And hopefully, I think it's been getting slowly better and better, and I think I've got it cracked. But it's been a nightmare. It's been one of the most challenging things I think I've ever done, which is a shame, because it's really nice paint. It really is lovely. It's easy to apply. It goes on well. It's got a lovely sheen to it, and yet problematic in ways that I hadn't come across for donkey's years.
It doesn't sound viable for commercial projects.
For a commercial project, I can't see how it would be. And this stuff, this is from an interior designer called Edward Bulmer. And this stuff is touted as quick drying because most normal linseed oil paints take 2 to 3 days before it's touch dry. I mean,
what's the advantage of it then? Is it just the paint settles out better?
So eco-friendly. It's all natural goodness. You could, paint it, put it on a wall, or dribble some on your chips. It's a bunny hugger. Well, not actually putting it on your chips. It is a tree hugger's delight, basically.
Right, okay.
Everything is totally natural and chock full of goodness. But it takes about a week and a half to paint 2 little bedside tables. So yeah, not really, unless you've got a very large workshop with plenty of space and you can have a drying room completely separate just for these little projects. I don't see how it's really viable.
But even then, unless it's hermetically sealed, you're still going to get bits of dust.
Yeah, you're still going to get
floating down onto it, and oh lordy, yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
So fun and games with that. It occurred to me as well yesterday. I was having a chat with the homeowner in this house that I was working in, where I did these alcove units, and again on through the guys that I know, in inverted commas, through Twitter and Instagram, there seems to be a lot of work around, and we talked about this a little bit last week. And I think certainly here in the UK, the spectre of stamp duty is a tax that's levied on houses and flats, property, when you buy somewhere. The stamp duty has become so high for so many people now that it's a ridiculous amount of money to spend when you could be using that money to fix up the place you have. And but just as I didn't see the homeowner for very long yesterday, but she just quipped, "Oh, great, these looks fantastic. That'll keep us going for another couple of years." And it's that thing that, yeah, okay, we'll do what we need to do for now to keep us going for a little bit longer, because, and I couldn't resist having a quick look on one of the estate agent websites. The stamp duty for somebody, if they were to buy that particular property, would be £357,000. They would have to pay that on top of the purchase price.
Buy a few houses for that up here.
It's insane.
That's crazy.
You would have to find that money from somewhere, and whether that's being funded by the sale of an existing property, or whether that's being borrowed or earned, saved, whatever. That's a staggering sum of money to shell out for what exactly? That you could use that money so much better than any government, couldn't you? I mean, given any sum of money, we could all come up with a way of spending it way better than any government could do it, even if they are pretending to act on our behalf.
But this is the thing. I mean, this is a topic that it's such a big topic. Housing in general in the UK.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your views on it are, but house prices are dropping a little bit at the minute, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And my worry is having kids.
Yeah.
At the moment, there is no way my kids will ever be able to buy a house, because by the time they're old enough to if property prices keep going up at the rates that property prices are going up at, even now, they wouldn't be able to do it, never mind in 10 years' time if things keep going the way up, because the cost of living in the UK is so high anyway, and wages haven't gone up in line with that, and property prices are just insane compared to probably when we first bought property and things.
Yeah, absolutely. They've rocketed in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
in particular. Because they're not building many more, certainly in London and the southeast in particular, where land prices are very high. we're just not getting the new housing stock being built, in which case the value of the housing stock that there is goes up. This is something that my son Jack has decided to. He went to university in Southampton, and he decided to stay there because it was easier for him to get to live, basically. But in fact, he has bought a flat with a little bit of help from us at 24, and it was simply easier for him to do that in Southampton than it is anywhere else. In fact, it was wouldn't have been possible to do that in London. And of course, he loves it. He's great. I have to make a central and going down there to replace a bathroom for him.
Fantastic.
So that'll be a video as well. Yeah, but that's the reality of the choices that people have to make now. He's opted. He would love to be back in London, but he can't afford to live here in the way that he wants. He'd be paying, hole in the head rental.
What's your view of building on the green belt?
Do it.
Yeah, I say,
Yeah, but do it. It's land. They're not making any more. I know that, but people need to live somewhere. We've developed this crazy house price structure of our own doing. It's because we've successively not been building the houses that people need, has created this house price monster. The government quite likes that because everybody feels good if the property they own is valuable, whereas it takes your mind off all the other things. But it makes it much, much harder for the next generation to get started.
Yeah, it's completely unsustainable, and it only benefits you if you're never planning on having children.
Yep.
And a family, because ultimately it's just a problem that's building up, and it's like, yeah, okay, you're fine.
Yeah.
But anyone else entering the market can't possibly buy a house. And it's crazy because from my understanding, 96% of the UK isn't built on.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of these stats that you hear getting bandied about. I don't know how accurate it is, but my understanding is 96% of the UK is open countryside.
Right.
Or land that could potentially have houses built on it.
Uh-huh.
And, you don't have to build on all of that, but imagine if we're just built on an extra, 4% of that, or something, it would instantly resolve all these problems.
Mm.
And yes, there would be a massive crash in house prices, but something's got to happen because the way things are at the moment is just wrong and completely unsustainable.
Yeah.
Something's got to change. I just don't understand it. And it tends to be people who already live on the green belt in big houses who complain about this.
Who object to the potential of blighting their views in the morning.
Yeah, and I mean, around here where we are, and I'm on this giant housing estate, and it is on the green belt, and every time the plans for this estate were put together 20 or 30 years ago, it takes so long for these things to actually come into reality.
Yeah.
But it was always planned that it would be of a particular size with the roads going in a particular way and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so much of the development has been held up by people who already have a big house on the green belt saying, well, I don't want a house next to my house. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, but it was all right for you to build a house on the green belt. But as long as no one else does. So it just seems so hypocritical. And I get really worked up about it because it's a problem that it is going to hit everyone unless you're just being utterly, utterly selfish. And you're just thinking, well, I'm fine. Stop building houses, please.
Yeah. As well, I think we've got to seriously look at and think about how the planning consent is given for the types of houses that are built. There's I think it's Channel 4, Kevin MacLeod, Grand Design guy, has a TV show on at the moment called The Street, and I don't know where it is, but they've completely relaxed planning regulations. They've sold building plots for £100,000, I think, which is still a hefty chunk of change. But people are allowed to self-build their own homes with far greater freedom than they would have under normal planning regulations. And it's really interesting to see the people go through it. And they're all, there's the eco-friendly crowd who are doing lime renders and stuffing wall cavities with lime and hemp mix and all kinds of stuff. And there's people building them out of stainless steel and glass. It's a really interesting take, a really interesting approach. And again, we talked as well on a previous podcast as well, where there was an estate in Cambridgeshire somewhere where there were live-work units built like houses, but with big garages so that people can work from home effectively and do all manner of different kinds of work. These are the kinds of things that we need going forwards into the 21st century. And yet we get stuck with, as you say, people who already have all the benefits of the big house and lots of land, preventing future development. As you say, it's completely unsustainable. And sooner or later, it's going to explode. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we would change a government or two again.
Something's got to change, but it's interesting around here because I follow the plans around Great Park quite closely, and I always have done because I just find it interesting, and it's quite interesting when you see, because this whole area here is getting built by one of two, well, basically a consortium of two of the biggest house builders in the UK. And the quality of the construction is shockingly bad. Yeah. It's just absolute stuff's knocked together. At the end of the day, it's brick and block, so there's not a lot that can really go wrong with it. But all of your second fix stuff is not great, So I do agree with people when they say, materials and stuff. Yeah, chipboard doors where the door handles fall off after a couple of years and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the plans for these houses where we are were put together like 15 years ago.
Wow.
It's just because it takes so long for this to go through planning. But if you look at like the original plans for like our property, it's dated like 2001 or something like that. And it's like, oh my word. And it's just because that's how long it's taken for it to go through the system to the house actually getting built. So everything is like 15 years out of date.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's insane. I mean, this is specifications on the building, like the detail of the build, where they can't change it because it's all gone through planning and building regs in that form, and it's 15 years out of date. It's just like, wow, it's crazy. But
madness.
I think one of the biggest problems is constantly awarding these massive contracts to a handful of the giant developers, and there needs to be a much bigger push on smaller developers, and as you say, self-build plots and all that sort of thing. But then the problem is that these bigger developers already own all of the spare land, because I'm not sure if you're aware of developers' land banks, and how much land they already own. But I might do a video about it at some point because it's quite interesting. But you look at the top developers in the UK, and they're sitting on like 130,000 empty plots that they could immediately build houses on them, but they're just sitting on the land just to keep their land banks like nice and full to keep the shareholders happy and all that.
When our houses were built, the one that we live in here, they're kind of 1870s or thereabouts. They were, and you can see by looking at them, they were sold off as plots of 4 or 5, and independent builders would put on a terrace of 4 or 5 houses, and sometimes you see the style change slightly along a terrace where some other builder had put the next lot on, kind of thing. And it's really interesting to see. I think that and they were speculatively done. The builder would buy the plots, put the houses up there, and sell them. And that was kind of how it worked. And it's really interesting as you walk around London generally, but these streets in particular, and other cities as well, I'm sure, you can see the styles of houses change slightly along a street, along a terrace, where the different builders have actually put their own stamp on the properties originally. You know, they take a slightly different take on the tile detailing above the doors, or some of them have sort of set-back front doors with a domed porch sort of archway and all that sort of thing. It's fascinating. But it seemed to be much more open back then, where, you know, small independent builders could actually have the opportunity just to buy 5 or 6 plots and build a few houses on them and see what happened. Yeah.
And now we're in the position where entire towns are being built by a single developer.
Yeah.
You know, as I say, best part of 4,000 houses here. And, well, it's a consortium of 2 giant developers here. But interestingly, over the course of the project, there were more than that. But developers have bought up other developers.
Right.
So now it's down to there's only 2 of them now. You know, I think there was 4 or 5 at the start. But there's been so many acquisitions in the meantime. It's just, but yeah, as you say, something needs to change. I don't know what the answer is.
No.
Obviously, there needs to be regard for people getting into massive amounts of negative equity and stuff, which wouldn't be a good thing.
No.
But other than that, just saying, I want the house prices to stay as they are so that I stay very rich isn't a great answer to things when it means that nobody else can ever buy a house. So.
Yeah. It's as you say, it's not a sustainable approach at all.
Post your feedback to Twitter, Measuring Up PC on Twitter, also Instagram, and drop us a note via the website measuringuppodcast.com and go to the contact form on there and drop us a note and let us know your thoughts on it, because this is a giant topic.
Yeah, especially if you do live on the greenbelt in a giant house and you object to putting these little rows of modern boxes in your view, because we'd really like to have your take on it. I don't know any people like that, but I would really. I mean, maybe you built the house you're in and you did it specifically so that you had that view on a greenbelt, so that it would be that view forever. We'd love to hear from you wherever you are and wherever you live.
What else has been happening? Luminary
has been happening. Luminary is a $100 million venture capital backed startup. I don't know if you can call a $100 million backed company a startup. A subscription service for podcasts. They're calling them podcasts, but many of them are going to be sort of exclusive. And there's a big debate about this. I suspect that's $100 million flushed down the pan, to be honest, because they're trying to be a $8-10 a month subscription service for podcasts, but a lot of the big players have said, no, you don't get our podcasts for free. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Apparently they have 40, it's going to be a general purpose podcast player app as well. Like, that market isn't crowded at all. But apparently it's a 100-man team and they've got 40 software engineers working on one app, which seems like a staggering number to me. I don't understand it at all.
It's similar to the Patreon model, isn't it? Where they've got like some crazy amount of engineers working on basically a website that hasn't changed in well, it had a little refresh a month or so ago.
Hasn't changed for the better, that's for sure.
It hasn't changed in the entire time we've been using it. So what are the 100 and odd engineers actually doing?
I don't know. So anyway, Luminary is going to be interesting, I think. Lots of people posting very negative comments about it. It's not going to use the regular RSS feed that we use to put a link out for our podcasts. So it'll be it'll try and be an exclusive sort of, Luminary only podcast thing, as well as happening to play other podcasts. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think that the podcast subscription model is really established at all.
I don't think so.
It's interesting to see as well. We do get many comments from people who say that this is the first podcast that they've listened to. So, I think podcasts generally will be a a real growth industry, and it's no surprise that these bigger entities are getting involved. We talked a little bit about Spotify, of course, buying Gimlet Media and Anchor a few shows ago. So yeah, no surprise that these bigger boys start getting involved. But we'll see what becomes of them. As I say, I think that's 100 million down the pan. I would love some of it to flush my way, but I think they're going to struggle, to be honest.
It's interesting when you hear about these venture capital backed projects where you just think, how is that going to work?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Unsplash.com?
No.
So Unsplash is a website where you can get free stock photography.
Oh, right.
And it is...
I hate those guys already. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of hate towards them because in the past there's always been websites out there where people can upload their own photos and you can get royalty-free stuff. But Unsplash...
Wikimedia as well, of course.
Yeah, and Unsplash is kind of the same thing, but I don't know, it's just turned into a bigger thing. And when you look at the quality of the photos that are on there, they are stunning quality photos. You know, these are...
Right.
You go on, you do a search for a topic, and it's always handy, you know, if you're running a blog or, a website or something, it's you need like a little background image and, you want a picture of a piggy bank or so, you know. And you go onto one of these websites, and normally you would have to pay a lot of money to use a photograph for commercial use. Yeah. And you can't just take any photo off the internet and copy and paste it onto your website. Trust me, you don't want to do that without the necessary permissions, unless you want to get sued by like Getty Images or something, which don't go there.
No.
But yeah, Unsplash, it gives you a completely free license. It used to be Creative Commons Zero, which is kind of the most open Creative Commons license model. But now they've got like their own license. It's not a Creative Commons thing anymore, I think. But anyway, the crux of it is that the quality of the photos is just stunning. But there is no monetization whatsoever. I just do not understand the business model of a company giving away photos that you would normally pay thousands of pounds for.
So where do they get the photos from?
People upload them. So basically, if you're a photographer, and kind of the argument is, or one of the arguments I've heard, is that every time a photographer goes out taking photos, they maybe take like 2,000 photos of a thing to get one good picture that they're happy with.
Yeah. And there are always overs, yeah.
And then what happens to all the photos that they're not happy with? Let's at least do something with them. So it's kind of a lot of photographers kind of view it as they're not quite their best work, but someone can make use of them if they want.
And presumably they have to be credited.
They don't have to be, but you can.
So
when you download the picture, it comes up with a thing saying you don't have to do anything. You can use this completely free, completely for commercial use, blah, blah, blah. It would be nice if you could leave a credit, but you don't have to.
Wow.
And it puts me very much on edge. And apart from anything else, I think it completely devalues the photographic industry. And, you know, I've seen similar things in the music side of things for a long time. You know, Spotify has really killed the music industry. Yeah. And there's a lot of folk now saying you might as well just give up on charging for music. If you want to make music, give it away for free and try and make money off the back of doing shows or merch or whatever, which I don't think's a good answer, but at the same time, the industry's completely screwed.
Well, it's a great answer if you're a big star, but it's no answer at all if you're a startup musician,
exactly, and
or photographer. Come to that, yeah.
And this sort of thing is very similar. But honestly, the photos that are on it, you look at it and it's like, how are you giving that away completely for free?
Wow!
And then, but even the website itself doesn't. So you can go on there, create a profile in like 30 seconds, and upload as many photos as you want.
Yeah.
Those photos then come under the Unsplash license agreement, which effectively means you've washed your hands off them and everyone can do anything they want with them. You've got magazines, like magazines with who would normally charge £30,000 to advertise in, do a full page ad in their magazine, and they're using completely free photos off Unsplash as stock art in these magazines that are making millions of pounds, and it just seems insane. So, anyway,
well, that's crazy. That again, photographers being their own worst enemy by the sounds of it. Why would you do that? It sounds...
Yeah, I don't get it. I think they're kidding themselves into thinking, oh, well, I'll get millions of views and I'll get loads of views off, loads of work off the back of it. And it's like, you're selling your soul.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway,
they're up the creek and they've hooked the paddle. There you go.
It'll be interesting to see what comes of it. But as I say, the whole website's not monetized in any way whatsoever at the minute. So I don't understand how.
Okay, well, I'll have to go check those out. And anytime I need an image for a blog,
presumably that's another VC backed.
I presume so. Again, but what's the payoff on that? What can they possibly hope to achieve?
I don't
know. Other than selling it to somebody else, selling it to Getty.
Well. Yeah. It'll have some notional value at some point, and someone will become very rich off the back of
well, yeah, sure.
photographs that people have put out there for free.
Other people have taken, yeah.
Cool. What else has been happening?
I went to, I think last time we were recording, I was popping out in the afternoon to look at a floating shelf for somebody, and the customer had given me dimensions. I'd given them a rough guide price. I went out there to do to template it's just a single floating shelf in a sort of alcove space, unusually wide. We had a little chat about this, didn't we? And I went out there with my little template board ready, 20-30 mil shorter, and I little double-sided tape around the edges, and I put little bits of Correx around it just to get the shape. And I went there, and it's 227. I measured it carefully. 227 mil shorter. 227 mil wider than the dimensions that he gave me.
That's nearly a foot out.
I mean, it's just how could you even get that size? Run a tape measure over it, and maybe you'll be 20 mil out either way or something, because you read something wrong. But 227 mil.
I'm assuming you didn't make anything to their dimensions.
No, I didn't. I haven't. In fact, the wall was pretty straight. There's a slight bump in the centre of it, but at least that was my 227 mil shorter board than it should have been. At least could tell me that, because it had square ends. But yeah, I mean, just staggeringly out of size. I mean, this is why you never, ever trust customers' dimensions on anything. But I just don't know how you could be that far out.
I mean, every time I've asked customers to measure up stuff for us, if it's a job that's a bit further away and it's like you don't really want to go out and
just give me a rough idea.
Yeah, it's like just give us and most of them just kind of give us a blank look, and it's like, can you not do it? And it's like, can you just give us a very rough idea? And but you would think it would be closer than to within a foot.
Yeah, I mean,
That's it.
I went into the room and looked at the space, and I looked at my board and I thought, that's way smaller. But I gamely offered it up and thought, no, that's way smaller. I just don't know. I haven't met the guy. I was there when his wife was there, but just
that's crazy,
extraordinarily out of size. And it just beggars belief. I don't know what he did.
Had they read the metric measurements instead of the imperial measurements or something? Have they told you that it's however many centimetres when it was actually, they should have said inches?
No, because that would be two and a half times bigger.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't really work. That's insane.
Yeah, mad. Anyway, yes, lightened my day. Anyway, had a good laugh about that one.
Funny. Yep. Always measure up.
Measure up.
In the living room. Yourself.
Always.
Okay, we're best winded up for this one. Just a quick announcement, though, a very exciting development to all of our Patreon supporters. We're going to shake things up a bit, because we've got a lot of people who want to support the show at a higher level, but we can't do the shout out on the show, because we're going to end up doing nothing but shout outs, because we're already doing quite a lot. But there's a lot of people who get in touch saying, we want to support you at a higher level, but they would like to have a little shout out in the show.
Not unreasonably.
Which isn't unreasonable. So what we're thinking, what we've decided we're going to do is we are going to completely open up the $3 and above tier, and instead of having a set bunch of patrons, we are going to make it so that we do a random 20 each show. So we'll do 10 each, and it'll be completely random from everyone who's supporting at $3 and above. And we can't think of a fairer way of doing it than that. So I hope that's okay with everyone. We'll put a little announcement on Patreon as well, so you're all aware of it. But from the next show onwards...
Andy's going to make a randomizer especially for this. Yeah, I'll do a video about it.
I haven't quite decided how I'm going to do that yet, but I'm sure I can do something in Excel that will give us 20 random names each episode.
Sure we can.
So if you support at $3 or above, then you will automatically be entered into the kind of the bucket, and we'll pick out 20 random names each episode, and we'll read out and we'll do it that way. If you don't want to be read out, but you still want to support us at $3 and above, then do please drop us a note to contact@measuringuppodcast.com and let us know, and we'll make sure that you're not included in the list. But so far, I don't think anyone's
I don't think so.
asked not to have their name read out. But we think that'll probably be a much fairer way of doing it. And then everyone supporting us at $3 and above has the chance of having a mention on a show.
Yeah, only one mention per person per week, of course. You can't can't be randomised to the point where you get several mentions for each individual. No, but I think that's a fairer way of doing it as well. Because whilst it is nice to read the same names out every week, let's give a few people a shake of the stick as well.
Yeah, we'll give it a try. We'll see how it goes, and we can always change it if it doesn't work.
Yeah, we can, because we're the grown-ups, and this is our show. I'm going to say thank you to Harry Capper, John T. Lynch, Duncan, Chris Stokesmore, Ben Campbell from the Colonel Collective, Jason Williams, Wilson Chan, Kevin Steer, Dominic Kajinson, Andy Farmer, Randall Davis, David Chisnell, Kevin Miller, Piece of Timber, Andrew Marnell, James's Man Cave, Graham Bailey, Mike Broom, Rakesh Patel, Paul Cunningham, and James Ian Wilson.
And a big thank you as well to Douglas Steele, This'll Do, Brendan at the Shades Workshop, Tim Bowers, Nick Fajardo, Adrian Millington, Chris Davison, Paul Gardner, Eddie Carroll, James Hewitt, Carl Poutney at the Strawbite Workshop, Steve Avery, Peter Tone, Owen Bullock, Tony Carnell, Adam Padley, Chris Mark Duthie, Max Vietz, Mark Duff, and Ben Harker. And, of course, music is Silver by Riot. And thank you once again for joining us on this show. It's been a genuine pleasure, and we shall see you in the after show.
Absolutely. Please, if you have the time, rate us on iTunes as well. And my phone's going. Sorry, hang on a sec. It's supposed to be on silent. It is on silent. If you've got a minute, then it really helps to push us further up the stack if you can give us a rating or a review on iTunes, because further up the stack is where we want to be. And you can support the show, of course, at patreon.com/measuringuppodcast. And we are extremely grateful to all of our Patreon supporters. Andy, where can people find you?
You can find me, Gosforth Handyman, on YouTube, Gosforth Handyman on Instagram, and Gosforth Andy on Twitter. Where can we find you, Peter?
I am 10 Minute Workshop on YouTube, at 10 Minute Workshop on Instagram, and at 10 Minute Shop on Twitter. Obviously, you can contact us at contact@measuringuppodcast.com or all the other ways of doing so. But I think that's it for this week. We will see our lovely Patreons over at the after show. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time at Make It Simple.